Hi, everyone. Today's episode is brought to you by Copper. Copper is the global provider of blockchain infrastructure solutions for institutional investors who are actively trading their digital assets. They have an award-winning custody application that's connected to 25 of the world's largest exchanges, and they ensure safe storage and movement of assets for some of the world's largest crypto hedge funds, market makers, family offices, and high net worth individuals. Copper's Clearloop is the first off-exchange settlement network for digital assets, and it's the safest way to trade balances in custody across multiple exchanges without requiring on-chain movement of assets. Head over to copper.co/Clearloop to learn more. That's copper.co/Clearloop. And today's show is also brought to you by Aave. Aave is a decentralized open source and non-custodial protocol where users can deposit and borrow digital assets. You can earn interest on those assets, and head over to aave.com, that's AAVE.com, to experience and learn more about DeFi. Today I sat down for a discussion with Andrew Steinwold, the founder of Fermion, an investment fund focused on the metaverse. For those of you who have read the book Ready Player One, you may already be familiar with the metaverse, or at least what you think it will be, which may be a place where people go with their VR headsets and just disconnect from reality. As you'll hear from Andrew, the metaverse could be much more multifaceted than that, and in some ways we may already be living in it with products and services like Discord and Roblox. Andrew sees public blockchains and specifically NFTs as foundational infrastructure for this future world. This was a fascinating discussion. I really enjoyed it. And so without further ado, here's my conversation with Andrew Steinwold.
Brought down by bad mortgage investments, Lehman, which has 25,000 employees, will be liquidated.
The federal government loans American International Group, AIG, $85 billion.
This is a different kind of market, and the Fed is asleep.
The federal government is stepping in to stabilize Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the two mortgage giants that have been threatened by the housing crisis.
The Bank of England has pumped £75 billion more into Britain's ailing economy with a new round of quantitative easing.
You print a couple $1 trillion and all of a sudden people start to worry. So out of this worry, we have something called the Bitcoin.
Andrew, thanks so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Matt, thank you so much for having me. I'm a huge fan and I'm really, really happy to come on.
Well, I appreciate it. And the metaverse is just a topic that I am thrilled to dig into. Obviously, I've read Ready Player One, and so I know everything about it, but I'm interested to speak to an expert. But maybe before we hop into all the topics around the metaverse, could you just give your personal background and introduction for us?
Yeah, definitely. So I first got involved with Bitcoin in 2013, and I had no idea what it was. I thought that, the number was going to go up, and it did. I was buying at $200 and went up to $1,000. And for like a 2-week period, I thought, okay, I think I might be the next Warren Buffett. And then, quickly shattered my hopes and dreams because it plummeted and went back down to 200. I sold at the bottom. And after I sold, that's when I was like, okay, I need to read about this because I knew, everyone's so fanatical about blockchain. They're saying Bitcoin's dead, but blockchain will survive. That was kind of what people were saying in the forums at the time. And so I started to dive deeper into what blockchain was, and it took me quite some time to understand it because I'm not technical. And when I did, I actually thought, okay, wow, there's some truly game-changing tech here. It actually will be very impactful going forward. And I actually dropped out of college. I moved to the Middle East to go work for a Saudi hospitality conglomerate, working like restaurants, hotels, construction, totally random. While I was out there, actually living in Dubai at the time, I learned about Ripple in 2014 and became, living in Dubai, no one's from there. And come salary day, which is once a month, people are lining up around the block to send their money back home. These people are paying like 10%, 15% fees off their, let's say, $1,000 monthly salary. So they're getting totally destroyed in the fees. And I thought, oh my gosh, Ripple is amazing. It's like the future. Like I was so obsessed with Ripple. I tried to do a remittance company utilizing Ripple, and that went nowhere, thankfully. I guess maybe not thankfully, but I think in hindsight, it was a good move. And then fast forward to 2016, moved back to the States. I want to focus full-time on blockchain and crypto. And I tried to do a blockchain-based accounting for small local governments. That, again, went nowhere. And I was trying to pitch all my technical friends that study computer science. And this is like 2016, and I'm pitching them blockchain, so it wasn't sexy. Plus, I have no relevant background, no relevant expertise. Like I should not have been doing that at all. But just trying to get involved any way I can. 2017, got really lucky. My portfolio had increased enough in value where I could launch a fund, as everyone did in 2017. But I thought, okay, I can't build anything myself and I can't convince anyone to join me to build something. But what I can do is I can deploy capital to the best entrepreneurs, to the best builders. And that's my way of contributing to the ecosystem. And so I knew nothing about funds. I teamed up with a good buddy of mine, Dan Patterson. He was a private equity guy for a number of years. So he knew all about fund operations, fund setup, fund structure. So we launched the fund in Polynexus Capital in July 2017, operated that for a number of years. It's still operational today, but It's mainly a vehicle for my capital, his capital, and family and friends money, nothing major. What we, kind of quickly realized was that, okay, we needed to focus and specialize on a specific niche within crypto to really outperform. And luckily, I started to get down the rabbit hole of NFTs. And around end of 2018 is when I really dove deep, because I went to a conference. And at this conference, I met someone who basically, long story short, he told me, okay, NFTs are going to be the biggest market in the world because all you need to access this market is internet. So 4.6 billion internet users, that number is growing every day. And then it's attached to this global and sensible 24/7 financial system that is crypto, right? And then, so the ease and cost of doing business is basically zero. You can transact with someone in China, UK, Venezuela, like essentially seamlessly comparative to today's financial system. And then you add in NFTs, which are, you can now turn every single digital good into a tradable asset. And on top of that, they're like user generated assets. It's not like you need some big central authority to issue this stock or issue this asset or whatever. It's just anyone can make one. So right away, I was like, this 100% is going to be the world's biggest market. Like user generated markets, like on this global financial system, like this is crazy. So I started researching, investing like crazy. That was basically February 2019, launched the fund, my personal capital, September 2019, purely focused on NFTs. Fast forward to summer 2020, started raising capital for that. No one liked the idea. Everyone hated it. And then got saved by DeFi summer starting to fade away in September. And NFTs got hot within crypto during September. And all those people I previously pitched, a lot of them, they called me back and said, hey, I want to get involved. And then was able to launch with some outside capital come this January. And now just focus full-time investing in the NFT sector.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for that introduction. I love the Ripple piece of it too. Ripple plays such a part in everyone's personal journey in crypto. I remember I was at I think it was the MIT Bitcoin conference in 2015, and Joey Ito was talking, and he was talking about the journey that you have to go to get into the space. You kind of start with Bitcoin, and then you're like, oh, Ripple's over here. Let me check out Ripple and spend some time on it. And a lot of people kind of go down the private blockchain hype cycle, and you kind of have to find your way. And I love the approach that you've taken in terms of thinking about your career, in terms of finding a specialty place where you can immediately become one of the foremost experts in the world on it, because it's so nascent. In a lot of ways, I identify with that, being at Fidelity, trying to work on something that wasn't very popular, wasn't one of the mainline businesses. What made you decide that NFTs and the metaverse was that thing?
Yeah, good question. So for me, I'm not technical. I'm not necessarily a numbers person, right, whatsoever, which is kind of funny operating a fund. But what I loved about NFTs was that they're not pure financial assets whatsoever. They're kind of like, they're used for all different sorts of purposes. So like, you need this sword to defeat the final boss or defeat this boss in this video game. You want this asset to display your status. You want this asset to join this community and kind of talk about this collectible or whatever. And having all these different reasons for people buying and selling these goods adds in a ton of weird and interesting dynamics. And it makes it more like quote unquote human comparative to crypto, which crypto is like mostly a pure numbers game. It's like mostly about mathematics and code, and number go up is like the ultimate objective. And in crypto for NFTs, there's so many different, there's so many different reasons why people are using these things. And I just found it much more appealing, I think, from my personal kind of standpoint. And again, with crypto, you're dealing with just an order book. And with NFTs, you're dealing with people. And I thought that my personal skills like lend itself slightly better in that arena comparative to crypto.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So just stepping back, we use this word, the metaverse, but what does this mean to you? And how would you define what the metaverse is to someone who's not familiar?
Yeah, it's a really tough question to answer, because it's kind of like saying internet. It's a super, super broad category. And like technically, the metaverse exists right now in Discord and Zoom and Facebook even. That's like, I guess in theory, not technically. For me, the metaverse is about rights. And it's about user rights specifically. So I think that the metaverse is only possible if the users can truly own their digital goods, because no one wants to spend a lot of time, money, and effort into a digital environment if they can't own their stuff, right? Like, Facebook could build the coolest virtual world game and in the world, and everyone could be there and using it. But if at any time you tweet out like screw Zuckerberg and your account gets deleted with all your stuff, that's like a pretty dystopian world. And not many people will probably want to live there or, exist and spend a lot of time there. And for me, it's about like user rights. So it's like, if I can own all my digital stuff, like, so we have property rights in the physical world. Someone comes in and steals my computer, I can call the police and they can arrest that person and return my computer. Why doesn't that exist in the digital, right? So that's just like a basic question. And I think that NFTs and blockchain more broadly is answering that. And I think that was the missing piece to the puzzle to enable this metaverse, right? And so I think that a lot of people see it as Ready Player One, which that's like the ultimate goal. But I think we can have it on our regular computers, desktops, cell phones, whatever, as long as we have that property rights, where it's flipping the paradigm of the current internet from value extractive of the user to value additive. I think that that's kind of the main thing here.
Yeah. And so you don't think that VR and AR is necessarily a prerequisite for the metaverse, it sounds like? Or do you think that it'll be staged where we're engaging through traditional front doors and then eventually it's a virtual reality existence? How do you think about that?
Yeah. So for me, the metaverse is mostly about user rights, specifically property rights. And so that's kind of the main prerequisite. And I think that the technological immersion of our communications like technology, because we went from like the telegraph to the telephone to the, now we're doing video calls, then fast forward, we'll be in like virtual headsets and virtual rooms and stuff like that. That's where we're going to head no matter what. But I think that you could have those environments controlled by Facebook, and sure, it's like a quasi metaverse, but it's not like the true one. The true one has to be with user ownership and blockchain-based assets in it.
And it truly has to be, I would argue, not controlled by one company. So it needs to be not only the money of a system like that, but I would say the kind of the real estate or the common property needs to be something that Zuckerberg can't shut down.
100%. Yeah. I think number one is kind of like the assets. So owning the actual digital goods, but then you're on a platform that in theory is like controlled by some company that can just shut it down or shut your account down, right? So then you don't have access to that. And that's for the functional side of NFTs. These assets, the functional assets, have some sort of purpose or use case within a digital environment. So it'd be like a gaming asset, a sword with 10 attack damage, or whether it be a piece of virtual land, like you can build in this virtual land. For things like art and collectibles aren't attached to a platform or some sort of digital environment necessarily. That's kind of separate because you can have that and have no issue with those assets at all. So yeah, I really do think that step one is really ownership of the assets, and then step 2 or 3 or maybe 4 is going to be kind of the, I guess, Filecoin vision of a totally decentralized infrastructure where we don't have to rely on Facebook shutting us down, because Facebook itself is like decentralized.
Right. What are the categories of necessary, what are the prerequisites for building the metaverse at scale? Kind of the Ready Player One kind of vision of what this could be. Obviously, you need decentralized money, you need decentralized storage, decentralized compute. I mean, what else needs to exist in order for this to actually work?
And that is such a good question. I think everything you mentioned, it's like every single ICO dream in 2017. Like if we were able to enact all of those things, then we'd be there basically. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's decentralized money, decentralized compute, decentralized storage. It just, yeah, we have to be within environments that instead of like, don't be evil, it's can't be evil. Like that has to be the prerequisite for the true metaverse to actually emerge. And it's going to take us like forever. It's going to take us many, many years to actually get there. And I think it's going to happen in stages. It's not like, Ready Player One today. So it's a really good question. What do you kind of think? Besides what you mentioned before, any other things that we're missing?
I think a lot about just what are the open source communities that are going to actually start to build this. And so if you think about the internet and the groundswell of just academics and grants from the government, governmental agencies that were building towards this future, that propelled it in a lot of ways. And I guess you see that in crypto, right? Where you see these, large, huge open scale projects that are building towards it. So I think a lot of this is going to come out of the open source community. But the fundamental tension is the one that you pointed out, where you'll have the centralized companies versus the decentralized companies. I really wonder how that goes, and whether or not there will be companies that almost decentralize themselves as a way to get there. I mean, what's your perception? Are there companies that actually are building towards this future right now, or is this kind of something that is further off?
So I think there's people that are building the prerequisites that you mentioned before, like, Filecoin, there's Golem for compute and stuff like that. So there's like those kind of key pieces of infrastructure, and those are years and years away. The more relatable platforms that are being built or have been built today are these simple virtual worlds that we're seeing. Cryptovoxels, Decentraland, Somnium Sandbox. Those are kind of very simple initial, I call them like the pre-Napsters, because we're not nearly an Napster. That'll be, a couple of years. Then we're gonna have an iTunes moment that'll be mainstream, and Spotify, where it's like totally easy. Everyone's using it. So I think we're probably a decade out at least from that, but also I'm like super wrong with all my predictions. So who knows? And then, yeah, I think it's going to be, there's people doing the small pieces here and there, but I think it's going to take a long time to actually come to fruition. But these virtual world platforms, what makes them so exciting and so much kind of like a quasi metaverse is that the asset ownership is decentralized. You can own this piece of land and you have unlimited optionality in what you want to do with that land. So if you want to make a gallery, no problem. If you want to make an e-commerce store, you can do that. If you know how to code, you can make a small mini game. So I like the ability for people to, they have unlimited optionality and what they can build. That's great. It's kind of like Metaverse is all about rights and optionality, essentially. And then also on top of that, they have true ownership. But the final piece of that specific thing is decentralized compute and storage, right? But that's like almost a separate piece of the Metaverse puzzle, because those are going to be these open protocols that are blockchain based in some sense.
In a lot of ways, what this is going to look like, I almost think you read science fiction for a vision of what the world might look like 30, 40, 50 years from now. And people have been talking about this for a long time. And look, like Second Life was kind of in this vein, right? Like people spent an unbelievable amount of time in Second Life, and I think probably still do. So this is something that people have been building towards for a while.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's why to me, it's like, okay, now it's kind of, so the conversation I had with that guy at that conference when in 2019, that's when everything clicked with me. It was like, he was like, listen, the metaverse is now possible because of NFTs and blockchain. It was impossible for, even though it kind of already existed in Second Life, people were buying and selling land, clothing, avatars, etc. So that economy already existed, but making it kind of open and permissionless and the ability for anyone to go in there and start getting involved with is very, very exciting. Like you can't have people in the Second Life community join into that, the financial part aspect of that, if they live in some other country that isn't integrated into their financial banking systems, because I think it's mainly Europe and the US and North American countries that were able to access that. And so it's like basically having anyone be able to contribute is massive. And also being able to earn is essential for obviously life, right? So you need that for the metaverse to really come to fruition.
And do you see NFTs as that critical infrastructure that will just secure property in the metaverse? Is NFTs the thing that will be the digital real estate tool? It will be the tool to provision access to certain goods. Have we found kind of what that infrastructure is in the form of NFTs?
Yeah, I think obviously they'll evolve from where they are today. But yeah, fundamentally, I do think NFTs are that kind of key piece of infrastructure for property ownership in the digital world. And how they're going to look and evolve, it's going to be really crazy, because I've been thinking about NFTs a very, very simple kind of two-dimensional way, simple image, video file, whatever kind of IP connected to some blockchain token. I talked to a company called like Alethea AI. They're doing like this AI that you can integrate basically a personality into your NFT, take your CryptoPunk, give them GPT-3 essentially and make them talk. That's like, expanding what NFTs are capable of. So yeah, very plainly, I do think that NFTs will be the property rights, but then what we're going to be able to do to that and add on to that, it's going to be very, very interesting going forward. It's like we're not able to kind of predict Uber back in the AOL days of the 1990s, but we do know that those applications, like the Uber or whatever that might look like of NFT, is going to come out after X amount of years.
I think you're right. I mean, in the insight around Uber was, okay, now you have this piece of hardware in your hand that you have a GPS tracker and you can hail something and you can get something delivered to you, or you can get picked up. And with NFTs, I think this can secure property in a digital context, and we can prove that it's scarce and we can actually build communities around this infrastructure. So I think you're absolutely right.
I know it seems small compared to what we're talking about. We're talking about a metaverse and talking about virtual worlds, blah, blah, but property rights are the basis of like all successful economic systems. So it's like, that is the bare bones of what you need in order to start going forward, in my opinion, right? So I think that now that we've unlocked property rights and property ownership, that's when this is now when the fun starts. This is like when the experimentation will start. And for the next 20, 30, 40 years, like who knows where this is going to end up, but that's like opening up the GDP of the internet. Whereas before it wasn't necessarily closed, but it was attached to the physical world. Now we're actually opening up the GDP of the internet in the internet, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, because when you think about how limited the centralized internet is, we don't own our Twitter handles. I could establish a chat room or a website that hosts people congregating on Zoom or something like that, but I don't own that really. It's really owned by the company that I'm paying rent into in the form of using their services. And what we're talking about would be truly a user-owned domain within this internet or metaverse, whatever you want to call it, kind of the internet 2.0. So it's foundational, as are payments, by the way. And I think that was kind of the first thing that got solved before we got onto NFTs.
Yeah, no, totally. I think what's really exciting is that all these, like I mentioned before, like the 2017 ICO bubble, all these companies that had these crazy ideas, these are all possible. Maybe not at the time, because people thought they were going to all be live today and people were going to be using this completely decentralized internet. But they're all possible now because of blockchain-based technologies. And we're going to slowly, like, technology is this unstoppable steamroller that it just constantly keeps grinding forward. And so these things will happen. When? I have no idea, but we're headed towards that direction no matter what. Therefore, that means the metaverse is inevitable. It's not like it is a fantasy today, but it is something that will happen regardless of what we think.
And if you think about this through the internet analogy, I wasn't really around for this part of it, but if you think about the evolution of TCP versus OSI, there were people that definitely saw the vision of what Internet 1.0 was going to be before the browser was invented. And you could have known that that was going to happen, but been dead wrong on the actual architecture that it got built on. You could have thought that OSI was going to be this. There's that saying, OSI is a beautiful dream, but TCP/IP is living it. And the network effect built around TCP/IP, and it was off to the races. I could see that happening in a big way for a lot of people within NFT space, where all public blockchains actually, where there are big bets being made right now. And the difference between the internet era and the blockchain era is that you're actually putting dollars to work in those protocols and they're holding value. So as an investor, how do you think about platform risk and, which platforms you want to get behind in terms of what's going to power this stack?
Yeah, for me, it's probably the most important thing when looking at a potential investment is what underlying blockchain does this asset or does this protocol exist on? And I think what you were kind of mentioning before about TCP/IP was that Ethereum right now, is not highly scalable and maybe very expensive and, a little bit slow compared to these newfangled blockchains. But the network effect around it is so powerful that it's pretty hard to defeat today. It could change in the future. That maybe that's just the one we use going forward. Maybe EP.210 just crushes it and becomes very scalable, very cheap. But yeah, we're seeing like Flow, for example, that's also coming out and that's very scalable, very cheap, right? It's also pretty centralized. So there's kind of these trade-offs. One thing that terrifies me, I know this is not exactly what you asked, but one thing that terrifies me is that people, like users, don't care in general. Like users don't care about their data. When Facebook's like, hey, we got hacked and all your data's gone, like no one really cares. It's like that terrifies me because I want people to actually care about the ownership of their digital goods. But if they're all using some quote unquote blockchain that's actually centralized, then it's like, well, we haven't really gone anywhere, right? We're kind of in the same position. So I don't know how we're going to convince people to care. I think it has to be, we're going to point to things that, when people get banned from certain blockchains, it's like, wait a second, how did they get banned from that blockchain? It shouldn't be possible. That's like the only thing that I'm not hoping, but kind of hope happens, where people become more aware of their rights or the true rights on the internet. And so, yeah, I think, going back, like number one thing that we look at is what blockchain does this exist on? Will it be around in 3 to 4 years? Because anything beyond that is really hard to determine. Yeah. So I guess there's not really a clear answer in terms of who's going to be the winner today, but really there's a couple players in the blockchain space that are the players. Besides that, I don't really pay attention to anything else. Yeah.
As you're talking about users not really caring, it reminds me of just all the discussions we have around private key management and, even people that are holding one asset, Bitcoin, and not understanding how to secure it themselves. And these are big usability challenges. And I think in certain ways, we still need to solve those core fundamental problems in order for this metaverse to actually take off, because you don't want to be someone who controls a digital service with the GDP of Rhode Island on the metaverse, but then have that be held in a custodial account where you don't even know how to secure it, or that thing gets hacked and the whole thing goes up in smoke. So how do you think about just personal data sovereignty in the context of the metaverse?
Yeah. Okay. So going off that a little bit. So the two most popular platforms probably of the past 6 months or so have been Nifty Gateway and NBA Top Shot. These platforms are both, so Nifty Gateway is centralized, but they're amazing, right? I think Duncan and Griffin just crush it. Like no fault on them for being a centralized platform. I think it's actually needed, but it goes to show you number one platform centralized, right? NBA Top Shot, it's not, I wouldn't say fully centralized, but it's quasi decentralized in some sense, but it's pretty much kind of centralized, and it's also been crushing it, right? So it's like the two most popular platforms have been completely centralized, and people don't really mind. They actually like it because they don't have to deal with the blockchain. So that's just kind of one thing to point out, hoping that we develop better and better wallets and processes to go through to interact with the blockchain. It's kind of shocked me how long it's taken us, because I thought 2017, I was like, oh, no way people are going to be using MetaMask in like 2 years or something like that. And we're still using MetaMask. So I'm hoping solutions get better, but it always takes longer than I think. And in terms of data sovereignty, that goes hand in hand with kind of this vision of people being able to own their stuff. So it's like you, in theory, will be able to own your data. That's kind of also the vision of blockchain more broadly. And then also, I think a lot of what I'm talking about for the metaverse aligns with the values of the blockchain-based internet, right? They kind of go hand in hand. I guess the metaverse, the only way it differs slightly is because it's more, number one, like more of a slightly more immersive environment, or slightly more like human environment where you're like doing fun things instead of just like pure financial or kind of code related processes. And then besides that, it's, yeah, I guess just like, it's more of like living inside of these environments compared to just purely interacting with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as you're talking about Flow, I mean, the interesting dynamic there with Flow is that they're in with Dapper is that they're doing things that you really couldn't do with a purely, decentralized chain. I mean, going out and negotiating contracts with the NBA and the Players Union, and the fact that you have the LeBron James IP is really bringing a lot of people into that ecosystem. Now, that's very different from a user-generated meme or something like that, which doesn't require licensing. And so you've spoken about monetizing memes. And so I'd be curious to use that as kind of a jumping off point into what you mean about this, monetizing memes, and how you see that playing into this whole concept of NFTs in the metaverse.
Yeah, I think so. I tweeted like NFTs are monetizable memes. And what I kind of mean by that is NFTs are basically, especially on the non-functional side, like the art and collectibles, it's just a story. Right. And Nick Tomino wrote a great blog post about this, talking about how NFTs are the story and, the best story wins. And you can see like, yeah, I don't know, build a story of like Beeple, artist who's created one piece of art every day for 13 years. Like that is a very inspiring story and, definitely has something to do with the reason why he's one of the top living artists in the world now. Right. Not only that he just grinds, but also like what a compelling narrative can you build in order to promote this? And the fact that these assets you can fit a story inside of in a JPEG, for example, and then it has some monetary value that happens to be built on this frictionless global financial system. It's like, that is a crazy, crazy powerful thing because these stories can go viral just like a meme does. And that meme can accrue value very quickly. You can argue that the Beeple 5000 every day, whatever the piece was called, that sold for $69 million. That is a meme that went viral on every single news station ever and, sold for that immense amount. Of course, like most of the news came after the high sale, but still it's kind of like showcasing that you can have a story that goes viral throughout the internet, which is a global, it's not contained in Europe, not contained in America, it's global. And then it's attached to this system where the payments are frictionless. It's like, you're going to create immense value there. So that's kind of the concept. And then I was talking to Alex Massimej. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He's a French entrepreneur who founded a French American, I think maybe entrepreneur who founded Showtime. Maybe he's not American, but anyways, I know they've lived in America for a little bit, but anyways, he was talking to me about a meme marketplace that was built utilizing NFTs. And he was basically saying, what if you could incentivize people that create the best memes, they could sell it on this open marketplace. And, there'd be, as the meme's spreading, there's using token incentivization mechanics to every time you retweet, you earn one token or whatever. And then the creator of that gets a certain percent of that value accrual. And the more viral it goes, the more value accrues to that creator. So there's all sorts of like really interesting things that we can do through NFTs and through blockchain-based token systems, specifically to do with memes. And, memes are like the most powerful forces in the world. Like, Elon is always tweeting about them and saying he who owns the memes or controls the memes, controls the universe or something like that. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of empty space or like green pastures on specifically memes and NFTs, and how they're going to evolve, I don't know. But I know that by financializing memes, you're going to create a really potent mixture and a lot of opportunities.
And I guess it probably has some overlap with this idea of social tokens and some of the projects that we're seeing with BitClout and things like that, the ability to almost have value attributed to not only a meme, but to a personality.
Yeah, I think I call our firm a metaverse native investment firm because I do believe NFTs are the key to the metaverse, the missing piece that's needed to enact that kind of vision. But also we like to include social tokens as well. And any of these kind of newfangled blockchain-based assets or items that can kind of bring forth the metaverse. So social tokens is something that we look at. I think we haven't unlocked the aha moment for social tokens has not happened, but the idea of having some skin in the game with the influencer or whoever that you love so much makes a ton of sense to me. Like, being incentivized in their success and also getting special access and doing all sorts of using that token from a creator standpoint, using that token to give your community members all sorts of cool stuff and gifts or tipping or whatever, or access. I think that's really, really exciting. And yeah, I don't know how it's going to evolve, but I just have this feeling that it's going to be very, very large. The only thing that makes me hesitant or not as bullish on social tokens compared to the NFTs is that NFTs, I understood it quite quickly. I understood the opportunity quite quickly. Bitcoin took me forever. It took me weeks to really understand. So maybe, hopefully it's something like that. But with social tokens, I'm like, I can see potential applicability here, but it's not popping out at me. Is that a signal that, hey, maybe we're a couple of years away and it's not yet time? But, I don't know. What do you kind of think about social tokens? I'd love to hear your take.
Well, I think you bring up a great point around it being simple. Complicated bonding curve schemes and things like that are difficult to explain, I think is challenging, but people do react well to just a price. So maybe some of these that are coming along just have a price that's liquid and trading every day makes it easier for people to understand. I think there are big questions just on social tokens in terms of how you build up the social graph. We've already seen that kind of become a controversial issue with BitClout, where they scrape Twitter and kind of pasted on the social graph. But natively building up that social graph to me is kind of a key challenge.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I think BitClout is super interesting because it was just so controversial. And I have friends that either love it or they literally hate it. And for me, I'm still kind of trying to figure out, so I don't really have a strong opinion here or there. What do you kind of think about it?
Well, we don't hold any BitClout. We don't have an opinion kind of as an investor, but I think some of the controversy actually makes me want to understand it a lot more. Controversial projects, it's better to be controversial than to just be completely ignored, I would say. And so it's going to be really interesting to see if some of these, YouTube influencers and some of the folks that have massive followings actually activate their accounts and start to engage their fans on it. So I think it's still pretty early, to make a judgment.
Definitely. And whenever you have a product that gives that strong of feelings, that's something you have to be like, okay, what is this, right? Because people either hate it or love it. And that's where you're like, okay, well, somebody's here.
Yeah, they have an opinion, right? I mean, so how do you think about this as an investor? There are various ways that you can access this thesis around the metaverse. I mean, you could be investing directly in NFTs. You could be investing in ETH if you think that ETH is going to become the money for the metaverse. You could be investing in equity of companies. Where do you go? How do you think about this?
Yeah, no, really good question. So we like to, ideally, we want to be the one-stop shop for NFTs, purely focused on the NFT space. And we want to be able to invest in the pre-seed, seed, series A, equity round. We want to invest in the token that they launch. We want to invest also in the NFT that they launch. Our first fund that's actually purely focused on tokens, and it's more heavier weighted towards actual NFTs themselves. And then we have an allocation there towards crypto tokens that relate to NFTs. The next fund is going to be a venture fund that is going to be venture and token heavy, SaaS and stuff like that. Then have a minor allocation to NFTs. And basically, when I launched in 2019, the equity opportunities were just very scarce. Like there was not a huge number of great people entering the space and great investable opportunities, especially on like the infrastructure side. Like there was kind of the marketplaces and they were already kind of set and not too much activity happening there. And now it's totally 9-day difference where we're seeing explosion of people with incredible backgrounds, multiple exits from this company, that company that are now entering the space, building great products. So that's really, really exciting. So on the venture side, I see two main buckets. One is the trading infrastructure or like the financialization of NFTs. This is like marketplaces, loan platforms, insurance protocols, fractionalization protocols, anything to do with like kind of the financialization of NFTs, right? That's bucket number one, venture. Bucket number two is, okay, now you have your NFT, what do you do with it? It's like the experiential layer. How do you experience this asset? And that could be the Instagram of NFTs, which I think a lot of people are looking at. And that's, to me, that's more of a Web 2.0 experience with Web 3 enabled in it. But it's very, very exciting. I think it's going to be very, very popular. But one thing that's maybe a couple years out, maybe it's actually sooner than we think, but is the virtual world of NFTs. If you're able to make a virtual world and make the NFTs operable in that world, that's very, very exciting to me. So if there's a Pokemon game that uses NFTs, you don't need their permission. You can take their assets and start making the Pokemon game actually usable in that world. So if you and I see each other in the world, you say, hey, Matt, let's battle. And my fire Pokemon will show a flame animation or whatever, right? So we could battle. People could watch us. People could make bets and talk to us while we're battling, whatever. Whoever can accomplish that, that's like the ultimate aggregator for NFTs because it's like everyone want to be there. It's just like the Ready Player One kind of vision where everyone wants to be in that one universe. So anyways, yeah, I think on the venture side, those are the two big buckets, the trading infrastructure or financialization and the experiential. On the asset side, so I'd say there's roughly 5 buckets that I like to use for NFT assets. Collectibles, these are assets with little to no utility. They're like baseball cards or CryptoKitties. Number 2, game assets. They're assets with high levels of utility within their universe. It's like a sword with 10 attack damage or something. Number 3 is virtual land. These are like user-owned social e-commerce, gaming, creative platforms all rolled into one. Number 4 is crypto art. It's just art tokenized, put on a blockchain. Number 5 is other. It's like domain names, property titles, insurance, all these other smaller categories that are small today, but one day will be very large. So as a firm, we really like to focus on collectibles, game assets, virtual land. And we have a very minor allocation of crypto art. And then the other category, I think those markets are these use cases that I mentioned right now. They're like kind of more toys or fun things. The other category, that's where it becomes like more real, like, insurance and property titles and stuff like that. That's going to take some time. But I think those use cases specifically are going to be orders of magnitude potentially larger than these kind of more gaming and art and stuff like that. But what makes NFTs, direct NFT markets so exciting, in my opinion, among many things, but one of the most important factors is I think that the liquidity, at least right now, is kind of pooled together. So the art and the gaming and the virtual land, it's all kind of one comparative to the traditional world where you have art over here. An art market doesn't really interact with the game, the video game market, and the video game doesn't really interact with this market, right? So I think that combining them all together is really, really exciting and going to create, profound impacts that we're not really quite sure of today.
Yeah, I love the way that you broke that up with the taxonomies. I remember I did a similar thing when I was just trying to wrap my mind around public blockchains writ large back in 2014, 15 timeframe. What's trying to be money? What's trying to be a smart contract platform? What's a distributed compute system? The thing that you kind of jumped out to me when you're talking about the other bucket is domain names. Do you think that top level domains are a key kind of infrastructure component here? Does any of this work without a icon that is not owned by Icon?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. Domain names is something that I need to dive deeper into. And I have a big kind of question mark around just because, I think Icon or ICANN or however you pronounce it, that works because we're kind of forced to use it, right? Because we're not forced to use .eth or we're not forced to use HNS, like Handshake or whatever. Like people have, it's just whatever system develops and whatever system gains critical mass. And that is, to me, it's questionable because I can have Andrew.eth and I can have Andrew Handshake and Andrew, so many others. And I have no idea which is going to win. It's going to take a very, very long time for that to play out. Even domain names, we're forced to use that. So of course, it's going to accrue the most value and be the most popular, but how that plays out, I'm not sure. That's why we don't really get involved in the domain space because we're too uncertain and we feel more certain about other asset types.
Yeah, it's something I'm definitely trying to stay up on as much as I can, because if you believe that these domains are going to be the equivalent of owning land in the metaverse, then, you'd want to own the New York City or own the entire West. It'll be interesting to see how these evolve, and we'll have to have some sort of unification around some standards here. And there can't be, hundreds and hundreds of top level domain systems that ultimately win. We'll probably have a power law, is my guess.
Totally. Yeah. And you mentioned virtual land or virtual real estate. I think domain names is what we equated to virtual land and virtual real estate before. And now we're kind of translating that into the NFT space. But now we can actually own pieces of virtual land, which I think is very exciting because, as I mentioned before, the optionality that gives the users is unlimited, right? They can build anything they want. And I think that having that optionality and the property rights is the closest inclination that we have to the metaverse, is the closest thing that we have. And so I always like to use this example. I have a buddy, his name is Nate. He's the founder of Async Art. And he opened up a shoe store back, I think it was, 2019, a shoe store in CryptoVoxels, right? So avatars could walk in, they could check out his shoes, they could buy his shoes and put them on their avatar. And it's all through OpenSea. It's all seamless and quite easy. And that to me is hugely impactful for how I thought about it. Cause I was like, wow, people anywhere, no matter where they are in the world, can start a business totally native to this environment and start earning revenue. And I always joked, I was like, maybe one day he'll open up, 5 more locations in CryptoVoxels, open up in Decentraland, open up Somnium Space, right? These different virtual worlds. And then eventually after he has 30, 40 locations, he'd go public with a social token. And that social token could give users, 50% of the revenue. And then also governance rights over the next shoe design, all these kind of cool kind of add-ons that we could do. And of course, that would be a security. So there's different, we have to get that figured out. But the fact is that's possible today. And, it's something that we could do right now. And that is going to open up just massive, massive doors for the GDP of the internet again. And also I heard a story of, I think it was one of my friends that maybe it was their friend or something like that, but they're in the Philippines. They needed a loan for their house or something like that. And they got a CryptoKitty. I don't know if they got it from way back when, or if they were gifted or how. It was a Gen Zero. So it was a pretty valuable one. They put it on this NFT loan marketplace, got a $25,000 loan, that day, and then was able to go build out their house, or I forget what they were doing with that money, and then pay back the loan after, I think it was a 90-day term with the certain APY percent on top of that. And that is incredible, right? So there's no crazy amount of paperwork that you need to sign and no, of course, again, from a regulatory standpoint, I don't know if that's kosher, but But I think that what it enables is extremely powerful. And again, it's like all about this. Took a digitally native asset, put it on this platform, was able to get money, digital money from that, translate that into quote unquote real money, go do whatever they need to do, transfer it back into digital money, and then go about their day. So yeah, I just think that like we're just absolutely scratching the bare 1% surface of this, and it's going to get a lot weirder and cooler.
I totally agree. And I think people think through analogies. So one of the things that I've been talking to folks in my network about is just think about the places that used to hang out when the internet started for you, not when the internet started itself, but like when I was in high school, I used to run cross country and I used to hang out on message boards talking about cross country and track on like DieStat and Let's Run. But in the future, that will be a metaverse context, and you'll go and you'll hang out online with people, and you might have a headset on, you might have a VR goggle on, and you'll be doing the same type of things you were trying to do in Web 1.0 days. It'll just look totally different, and you might have to pay to get into one of those rooms, or you might be earning credits to do something. But in a lot of ways, these are just communities and different ways to organize communities is how I think about it.
Totally. And like right now, I'd say that Discord is kind of the place where a lot of the NFT people are hanging out in. And I've made incredible friends from there, which is really crazy because I didn't initially set out to be like, I'm going to make friends, right? Like it's more of a financial focus, but it's really cool that happened. And also it's really cool that people attend meetups inside these virtual worlds. There'll be pitch meetings where people will showcase their product and people can kind of comment and V for voice chat or text chat and just kind of talk to each other. And it's creating this really interesting, weird community that a lot of people, I wasn't around for like the early days of the internet, but a lot of people that are like older than me, they say, this reminds me of like the very, very early internet, which I think is really, really exciting. And yeah, it's a feeling that hopefully we can keep that weirdness like going forward.
Yeah. Keep the internet weird. I agree.
Right.
So Andrew, you're at the bleeding edge of this stuff and you have a great newsletter. Where can we send people to learn more about your fund, learn more about the metaverse, and stay up to date on what you're working on?
Yeah. So just DMing me on Twitter is probably great. My name is Andrew Steinwold, and you can just kind of search for me. And I have a newsletter and podcast called Zima Red. And if you just Google Zima Red, it should be, hopefully the first thing that pops up, and read and listen there.
Well, I definitely will recommend everyone go check it out. I'd say you're way ahead of the game in terms of picking a niche here that I think is going to be just enormous. So really looking forward to monitoring your progress as you go forward here.
Thank you so much. It was awesome chatting, and I hope to chat with you soon.
Thanks for listening to another episode of On the Brink with Castle Island. To find out more about Castle Island, visit castleisland.vc. To listen to all of our podcast episodes, please go to onthebrink-podcast.com or just click on the tab in our website. Thanks for listening.